one that whispers just beneath the roar of daily ambition and noise, is the need for an absolute, undeniable, unshakable sanctuary. If you listen closely to the silence surrounding your thoughts right now, in this reflective, quiet space, you will find the echo of an ancient yearning to be safe, truly safe, not temporarily insulated, not momentarily distracted, but fundamentally and eternally protected from the inevitable entropy, decay, and conflict that define the human condition. We begin this journey, a deliberate descent into the very core of stability, by acknowledging the terrifying vulnerability of existence. Imagine the world outside this moment, outside this protective veil of focused contemplation. It is a world of shifting sands, of promises that break like brittle glass, of economic tides that turn without warning, of relationships that fracture under the weight of unforeseen pressures, and perhaps most acutely, of the biological reality that our bodies, our most intimate dwellings, are ultimately finite and fragile, where, amidst this storm of perpetual uncertainty, do we drop anchor? Where is the refuge that does not eventually require its own defense? This is not merely a philosophical question for an idle hour. It is the vital, pulsating inquiry upon which our peace of mind rests. I invite you now to step fully into this profound realization, this recognition that the structures we have meticulously built, our careers, our reputations, our physical possessions, even our carefully curated routines, are at best sophisticated temporary shelters. They offer a certain degree of comfort, a temporary shield against the immediate drizzle, but they lack the foundational integrity required to withstand the true Category 5 hurricanes of life. When the tectonic plates of your reality shift, what remains standing? We are searching for the place described in the most enduring literature of hope, a rock of ages, a stronghold high above the fray, a shelter that requires no insurance policy and harbors no hidden decay. We are seeking God, not as a distant theological concept or ceremonial figurehead, but as the lived, tangible, ever-present reality of the refuge and the fortress. The very phrase, God as refuge and fortress, is a collision of divine immensity and immediate personal utility. It marries the infinite power of the Creator with the desperate immediate need of the created soul for safety. But how can an invisible being be a visible shelter? How can a spiritual truth provide physical and emotional security? This paradox is where our curiosity must sharpen, where our reflective meditation deepens. We must acknowledge the fundamental conflict. The world demands evidence, palpability, and measurable defenses, yet the truest security is found in something entirely transcendent, something that resides beyond the reach of human attack or natural disaster. The problem, perhaps, is that we have domesticated our idea of shelter. We think of a sturdy roof, thick walls, and perhaps a locked door. But the biblical concept of refuge is far more radical, far more absolute. It is not just a place to hide. It is a transformative presence that renders the threat impotent. This journey is about uncovering that ancient architectural blueprint of security revealed throughout Scripture. Think of the prophets, the psalmists, the apostles. Each one lived through instability, warfare, betrayal, and catastrophic personal loss. Yet their testimony remained unified. They knew a place the world could not touch. They possessed a security that defied their circumstances. What secret did they hold? What coordinates did they use to locate this impenetrable dwelling? we begin our exploration of this divine architecture with the foundational words of David, a man intimately familiar with the need for immediate, life-saving shelter. He was hunted, betrayed, living perpetually on the razor's edge of survival. He did not speak of refuge theoretically. He spoke of it experientially, mapping his escape routes onto the character of God. Consider first the profound assertion found in Psalm 9:90-10. David declares, "The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble, and those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you." Take a moment to let the weight of the terminology settle upon you. He calls God not just a refuge, suggesting a place of temporary retreat, but a stronghold. In ancient military strategy, a stronghold was the impenetrable fortress, built on high ground, often carved directly into solid rock, designed to withstand the longest siege and the most devastating assault. It was the absolute final line of defense, the place where safety was guaranteed, not by the thickness of the stone, but by the strategic impossibility of its capture. When the psalmist says God is a stronghold in times of trouble, he is not minimizing the trouble. He is magnifying the defense. He acknowledges the reality of oppression, the persistence of affliction, the grinding weariness of ongoing conflict. Trouble is inevitable, but vulnerability is optional for those dwelling within the stronghold. Yet note the critical prerequisite attached to this promise. And those who know your name put their trust in you. This is the open loop, the defining difference between simple awareness of God and true dwelling in God. Trust, in this context, is not a vague feeling of religious optimism. It is the active, deliberate decision to relocate your sense of security from the temporal to the eternal. To know His name is to know His character, to understand that God's nature is inherently faithful, unchanging, and ultimately victorious over all threats. If you know God's name, that He is faithful, that He is eternal, that He is immutable, then you have the map to the stronghold. If you only know the concept of God, the fortress remains locked and distant. The key is intimate, experiential knowledge. This is the first profound lesson of the refuge. True safety begins not with external fortifications, but with internal assurance derived from intimate knowledge of the divine architect. Now, let us turn our gaze to the anchor text of the entire concept of security, a verse so powerful it has been memorized by generations facing the abyss of uncertainty. Psalm 46:1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Pause and reflect on the quiet immensity contained within those three words. Ever-present help. Often, when we are overwhelmed, our greatest fear is that the help we need will arrive too late, or that the distance between our distress and the source of salvation is simply too vast to bridge. We fear the delay, the abandonment, the moment when the crisis reaches its peak, and we find ourselves utterly alone. But Psalm 46 offers a radical counter-narrative to that fear. God is not merely a potential help. He is an ever-present help. The phrase in the original language suggests a help that is found or proven to be extremely accessible, very near, and utterly dependable during the distress itself. It means that the fortress is not located miles away, requiring an arduous journey under duress. Rather, the fortress surrounds you the moment the trouble begins. Imagine the sheer magnitude of this concept. The moment the first wave of anxiety washes over you, the moment the bad news is delivered, the moment the betrayal strikes, in that very instant, the infinite power of the divine is already mobilized and surrounding you. You do not have to dial a number, send a flare, or wait for reinforcements. The refuge is not reached, it is realized. This redefines the architecture of safety. It transforms God from a distant watchman into an immediate shield, a strength that flows into your weakness the very moment your weakness manifests. The ever-present help is the antidote to existential loneliness and the ultimate rebuttal to the feeling of being forsaken. But perhaps the most magnificent and multifaceted description of God as sanctuary comes from the extensive lexicon of protection employed by David in Psalm 18:1-3. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. This passage is a masterclass in redundancy, a poetic piling up of protective metaphors. Why did David use 7 distinct terms? Why not just one? Because no single human word, no single metaphor drawn from our limited experience of defense can adequately convey the completeness, the complexity, and the absolute sufficiency of God's protection. David was using every military and geological term available to him to construct an image of total systemic safety. Let us dissect these metaphors slowly, allowing their stabilizing power to permeate our own sense of security. First, he is the rock here. In a land of shifting ground and seasonal floods, the rock represents absolute permanence, immovability, and foundation. When everything else erodes, the rock stands firm. To take refuge in the rock means basing your life on an unmoving reality that is impervious to the forces of change and decay that perpetually erode the temporal world. Second, he is my fortress. This reiterates the stronghold, the thick walls, the secure gates, the high vantage point. A fortress is designed not just to repel attacks, but to endure sieges. It is the place where, no matter how long the battle rages outside, the inhabitants inside are provisioned and secure. Third, he is my deliverer. This is the active component. A rock and a fortress are passive defenses. The deliverer is the one who steps out to rescue, to actively intervene, to cut the ropes that bind. God is not just a defensive barrier. He is an aggressive rescuer, pulling us out of danger when we are already caught in the snare. Fourth, he is my shield. The shield is the close-range defense, the tool used for immediate, personal protection against specific incoming blows. While the fortress protects against the general assault, the shield guards against the individual arrow, the targeted attack, the sudden, close threat. This signifies the highly individualized nature of God's care. He knows the specific threat facing you right now and provides the custom-fit defense. Fifth, he is the horn of my salvation. This ancient term draws its power from the animal kingdom, where the horn represents strength, dignity, and aggressive power. It signifies the triumphant, elevated power of God's saving grace. It is the symbol of salvation that is lifted high, visible, and utterly victorious. It is the assurance that the defense provided is not merely adequate, but gloriously successful. Sixth, he is my stronghold. Repeating the theme, David drives home the finality of the defense. When we combine these images, we realize that God's refuge is not merely a single structure. It is an entire defensive ecosystem, covering every possible angle of vulnerability. It is the immovable foundation, rock, the enduring architecture, fortress, the proactive intervention, deliverer, the personalized defense, shield, and the final victory, horn of salvation. Take a deep breath now, allowing the sheer weight of this multifaceted safety to settle upon your spirit. Stop running. Stop building temporary barricades out of effort and worry. The structure you seek is already complete, already present, waiting for your full habitation. The revelation here is profound. The true climax of seeking refuge is realizing that we are not meant to build our safety. We are meant to inhabit a safety that is already fully established and perfectly maintained. The refuge is not a place we earn access to through performance. It is a relationship we enter into through trust. The closed loop is the understanding that the invisibility of God does not equate to the vulnerability of His protection. His security is not made of physical materials that can be measured or broken, but of an eternal binding covenant that is entirely guaranteed by His unchanging nature, as Hebrews 6:17-19 will later confirm. A guarantee that holds us fast like an anchor, both sure and steadfast. This is the foundational truth we must assimilate. You are already surrounded by the most comprehensive defensive structure in existence. Your task is simply to cease the desperate, exhaustive search for external stability and to internalize the reality of this divine shield. You are hidden, secured, anchored. As we move forward in our meditation, we will explore the practical disciplines of dwelling in this shelter, how to stay under the shadow of the Almighty, Psalm 91, and what it means to anchor our souls in that guaranteed hope, Hebrews 6. But for this moment, let the foundational truth sink in. God is the rock. He is the fortress. He is available. Now, close your eyes. Visualize the surrounding walls of the eternal. Know that the moment you surrendered your searching heart to Him, your life became hidden, eternally secure within the ultimate sanctuary. This is where we rest. This is where we gain strength. And this is where we prepare for the journey ahead, anchored not by human effort, but by divine promise. If this truth, that God is a guaranteed, multi-layered refuge, brings a measure of quiet certainty to your spirit, I invite you to join us for the next part of this reflective journey, where we will explore the intimate details of dwelling under the shadow of the Almighty and the promises that secure our eternal safety. Allow this foundational assurance to stabilize your heart now, preparing you for the deeper rest we seek. The soft weight of silence settles around us now, a heavy velvet curtain drawn across the clamor of the world we temporarily abandoned. Yet, how often does the exterior stillness merely amplify the roaring anxiety within? How often do we seek refuge in the quiet of the night, only to find the interior landscape is a battlefield where worries skirmish endlessly, where the ghosts of yesterday and the uncertainties of tomorrow conspire to rob us of rest? We are seeking more than just a momentary pause. We are hunting for an absolute, unshakable sanctuary, a place where the foundation itself cannot be disturbed, no matter the intensity of the seismic activity outside. This is why our understanding of God as refuge must transcend the fleeting comforts of temporary escapes, the casual distraction, the momentary denial, the shallow self-soothing that ultimately dissolves when the true storm hits. We are not looking for a lean-to or a makeshift shelter built of reeds and wishful thinking. We are searching for granite, for bedrock, for the eternal fortress that stands impervious to all time and tribulation. This is the promise that resonates deep within the ancient testimonies. When the psalmist cries out in the darkness, the language he uses is not abstract. It is profoundly architectural, fundamentally structural. He does not speak merely of a kind thought or a gentle presence. He speaks of fortifications designed for absolute survival. He proclaims in the powerful verses of Psalm 18 the very attributes we crave. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Pause for a moment and allow the density of that description to envelop your tired mind. Notice the deliberate layering of protective roles. Why so many synonyms for security? Why not simply, God is my safe place? Because our vulnerabilities are complex, and the threats we face attack us from every conceivable angle. We need a rock for immovability, a fortress for encompassing defense, a deliverer for active rescue, a shield for immediate protection against sudden incoming attacks, and a stronghold, a towering vantage point for perspective and oversight. Each term is a specific answer to a specific form of human failure, fear, and frailty. The contextualization of this search is crucial now. We may not be physically besieged by armies outside our door, but we are often besieged by relentless internal forces. The siege of chronic anxiety that drains our future, the assault of guilt and self-condemnation that hollows out our past, the bombardment of economic fear, relational isolation, or physical pain. These are not trivial discomforts. They are potent conflicts that threaten the very integrity of the soul. They create a tension that demands a resolution, a conflict that requires an absolute shelter. Where, then, is the entrance to this multifaceted fortress? How do we access this impregnable security, especially when we feel most exposed and frail? Is it a complicated ritual? Is it reserved only for those of great spiritual prowess? This leads us to the crucial open loop that draws us deeper into the heart of the refuge. The means of entrance is not effort, but trust. The path is not paved with achievement, but with surrender. We must understand that God's fortress is not merely built for us. It is built of His very essence, and the act of entering is simply the act of running into His established character. Consider the clarity and startling simplicity found in Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. This is not a casual stroll. The image is one of urgency, a desperate, heart-pounding flight from impending danger. The righteous run. They do not linger. They do not debate. They do not pause to pack their bags of worries or attempt to solve the crisis outside before they seek shelter. They recognize the immediate, critical need for absolute security, and they make a desperate sprint toward the designated sanctuary. What do they run into? They run into His name, and here we must slow down and expand upon this concept of the name. It is the most powerful and comprehensive aspect of the refuge. The name of the Lord is not just a label used for identification. It is the total summation of His revealed nature. When we run into the name, we are running into the totality of His holiness, His faithfulness, His unwavering power, His infinite love, and His promised steadfastness. The name embodies the historical record of His interventions, the theological weight of His omnipotence, and the relational warmth of His covenant loyalty. To run into the name means, practically speaking, to consciously and urgently substitute his perfect character for our imperfect circumstance. When the threat is failure, we run into the name that signifies absolute power, El Shaddai. When the threat is condemnation, we run into the name that signifies righteousness, Jehovah Tzidkenu. When the threat is scarcity, we run into the name that signifies provision, Jehovah Jireh. The tower is strong because the character contained within the name is flawless. This development of trust requires a pattern interrupted in our habitual worrying. We are naturally prone to trust systems we can see and manipulate. Bank accounts, physical health regimens, robust political systems. But these, Psalm 18 reminds us, are shaky ground. As for God, the psalm continues, His way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a shield to all those who take refuge in Him. Psalm 18:30. His way is perfect. Our ways are flawed, prone to error, subject to changing data, and limited foresight. Our plans, even the best laid ones, often fail to account for the unforeseen turbulence of tomorrow. But His way, His strategic, eternal, loving pathway, is without defect. It is perfect, and His word is tried. Think of metal tried in the fire. It is tested, assayed, proven to be pure and reliable. This means the promises we cling to, the promises that He is our rock, that He will deliver, that He does shelter the righteous, are not theoretical suggestions. They are factual guarantees proven true through generations of human failure and divine fidelity. They have been tested by every form of human crisis, and they have never failed. This tested word becomes the very substance of the shield He offers. A shield is not passive armor. It is an active defense, specifically placed to intercept a precise blow. When the dark arrow of doubt flies toward your heart, you lift the proven word, the assurance that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Psalm 46:1. And the fiery tip of the attack is extinguished. This is the practical, moment-by-moment experience of finding safety. It is a continuous, intentional act of taking refuge, not just once, but every time the enemy approaches the gate of the heart. The transition from external structure, fortress, to internal surrender, spirit, brings us to one of the most tender and profound acts of taking refuge, captured beautifully in Psalm 31. In You, O Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In Your righteousness deliver me. Incline Your ear to me. Rescue me quickly. Be to me a rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. For You are my rock and my fortress. For Your name's sake lead me and guide me. Into Your hand I commit my spirit. You have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God. Psalm 31:1-3-5. The intensity of the plea is palpable. Rescue me quickly. The danger is real. The desperation is acute. Yet the resolution is found not in fighting harder, but in yielding completely. The core of refuge is the final, ultimate surrender. Into Your hand I commit my spirit. To commit one's spirit is to give up the highest, most valuable, most central element of one's existence, the very animating force of life, into the care of another. This is the ultimate irreversible act of trust. It is the spiritual pattern interrupt that dissolves all remaining tension. The moment we commit the spirit, we are declaring that we are no longer the captain of our soul's destiny, no longer responsible for navigating the tempestuous seas of life alone. We are transferring the deed of our deepest essence to the only faithful God. the one who has already purchased and redeemed us. Think of the emotional weight lifted in that transaction. When we try to hold on to our spirit, we are desperately clinging to control over the uncontrollable. We become the fragile caretaker of an infinite treasure in a very dangerous world. The commitment, however, is the moment we step back from the edge of the cliff and realize we are standing inside an impenetrable chamber. The burden of self-protection is dissolved. The rest we seek, the profound, unshakable peace, comes precisely from this absolute commitment. It is the re-engagement, the necessary midway check. Are you still carrying the heavy load of your own life? Or have you deposited the entirety of your being, your past regrets, your current anxieties, and your unknown future into the hands of the faithful God? The security of the fortress is only realized when the inhabitant ceases their anxious patrols of the perimeter. We are brought now to the great reveal, the climax of this search for sanctuary. The refuge is not just an external structure we run into, but an internal reality we inhabit. The walls of the fortress do not merely surround us, they define our very existence. The ultimate safety is achieved not by securing our temporal life, but by hiding our eternal life. Consider the profound, staggering theological depth of Colossians 3:3. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. This is the impenetrable security. The fortress is not merely adjacent to us. We are already inside the ultimate safety mechanism. We are hidden with Christ, the perfect Son, who is securely dwelling in God, the ultimate power. This is security layered upon security, like a treasure hidden deep within a vault, which is itself placed inside an underground bunker, which is itself sealed beneath a mountain of divine protection. If our truest, most valuable life is hidden in this eternal, omnipotent reality, then what power does external circumstance truly hold over us? The problems have not vanished from the world, but they have been rendered fundamentally powerless over our ultimate destiny. They can batter the temporary structure of the body or the bank account, but they cannot touch the core essence of the hidden life. The open loops of anxiety about the future are closed by the definitive statement: our life is already secured in the only safe place in the universe. The refuge is thus a state of being, founded upon the accomplished work of Christ, maintained by the constant character of God, and accessed by the simple, repeated act of surrender and belief. The rock is immovable, the deliverer is active, the commitment is complete. In conclusion, let the weary mind find rest in this settled reality. The world outside may rage, the winds of chaos may blow, and the waves of uncertainty may crash, but the eternal foundation upon which you stand, the strong tower into which you have run, remains absolutely fixed. The fortress of God's character provides not just temporary shelter, but ultimate, unassailable permanence. This is the deep rest, the peace of knowing that your life is not merely sheltered by God, but safely hidden in Him. Therefore, our final act must be one of conscious, deliberate, and restful committal. Let us now take this truth from intellectual understanding to embodied experience. As you prepare to release the day's burdens and welcome the restorative deep sleep, visualize the most pressing anxiety that remains clinging to your soul tonight, the fear you are still trying to protect, the future you are still trying to control. Name it quietly in your heart. Now, with the firm certainty of Psalm 31, consciously and fully commit that specific worry, that specific fear, that specific burden into the hands of the faithful God who is your rock and your fortress. Say it, either aloud or within your heart, with the deep breath of surrender. Into your hands, O Lord, I commit this burden. I run into your name and I am safe. Rest now, hidden and secure within the impregnable fortress of his love. Let the quiet work of divine preservation begin. The world outside is receding now, the sharp edges of the day smoothing into the quiet, pervasive blanket of night. We have spent time considering the initial invitation to shelter, the simple act of stepping across the threshold. But now, we must walk deeper into the structure to understand the architecture of this divine protection. This is not a flimsy tent pitched temporarily against a mild shower. This is the impregnable stronghold, built not of brick and mortar, but of eternal character. Lie back now. Let the weight of your body sink into the place where you are resting, feeling the stability beneath you, and allow your spirit to enter into the absolute, unshakable certainty of God as your fortress. Think of a true fortress, one designed not just to withstand attack, but to render attack meaningless. It is defined by its height, its foundation, and the material from which it is constructed. And when we look to the Scriptures, we find Psalm 18, a declaration by David, not just that God provides safety, but that he is the very definition of defensive strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Notice the deliberate layering of descriptions here. It is not enough to call him a refuge once. David exhausts the language of defense to capture the totality of God's provision. He is the rock. What does that imply? It implies an ancient geological permanence, a massive foundation that predates any threat, impervious to erosion, immune to the shifting sands of human anxiety or global chaos. Your foundation, when placed in him, is not reliant on the volatile market, the changing tide of political unrest, or the fickle nature of human relationships. It is set on the immutable bedrock character of the Almighty. Then, he is the fortress. This suggests thick, insurmountable walls, towers rising high above the threat, and gates that cannot be breached. Imagine standing within those walls. What kind of fear can truly penetrate walls built by omnipotence? The things that harass and pursue us in the open field, the anxiety about tomorrow, the relentless criticism, the lingering guilt. These forces approach the fortress and find themselves facing something impenetrable, something that simply laughs at their attempts to scale it. The fortress absorbs the shock, neutralizes the assault, and leaves the enemy outside frustrated and defeated. He is also called the stronghold. The stronghold is the inner citadel, the final, most secure room where the king retreats when the battle is fiercest. Even if the outer walls were somehow compromised, which they cannot be, there is an internal, deeper security. This speaks to the absolute core of our being. Even if our circumstances feel chaotic, even if the external manifestations of our life seem to be failing, the true us, the soul that trusts in God, is secured in that innermost chamber, untouchable by external destruction. We must reflect deeply on the proactive strength of this fortress. It is not merely static defense. It is a promise of active deliverance. Proverbs 18:10 captures this essence perfectly. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. Picture that tower. It is high. Running into it requires effort. the effort of faith, the decision to turn away from self-reliance and towards divine assistance. But the moment you cross that threshold, you are not just sheltered, you are elevated. The strong tower provides perspective. From its height, you can see the threats approaching, but they appear diminished, distant, and ultimately unable to reach the summit where you stand. The elevation changes everything. The anxieties that seemed overwhelming at ground level become minor concerns when viewed from the altitude of God's sovereign control. You are safe not just because the walls are thick, but because you have been lifted above the danger zone entirely. Take a deep breath now, inhaling the quiet air within this sanctuary. Let the heavy assurance of this architectural safety fill your lungs. In this divine fortress, we find relief from the relentless pressure of exposure. Isaiah 25:4 reminds us that God is a refuge for the poor, a refuge for the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storm, and a shade from the heat. The world is a harsh environment. It subjects us to storms of adversity, sudden, violent events that threaten to uproot us entirely. And it subjects us to the relentless, slow burn of the heat, the continuous pressures, the long droughts of difficulty, the scorching temptation that fatigues the spirit. But here, within the walls of the fortress, God becomes the active solution to both. He is the shelter from the storm. When the winds rage and the rain floods, the structure stands firm, deflecting the violence. We do not have to fight the storm ourselves. We simply rest within the protection of the one who commands the elements, and he is the shade from the heat. The shade is a mercy provided during the long haul, the persistent suffering. It is the relief that allows us to recover our strength, to avoid dehydration of the soul. In this spiritual shelter, the heat of worry, the glare of judgment, and the scorching fire of temptation are mitigated by the cooling presence of God himself. We are not just surviving, we are being sustained, nursed back to spiritual health under his canopy. This fortress, however, is not merely defensive. It is actively protective and morally just. Nahum 1:7 assures us, "The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in him." This is the re-engagement point. Listen closely to the implication. God knows you. This is not a generalized blanket protection offered to an anonymous crowd. This is a personalized, intimate defense. When you run into the tower, he not only seals the door behind you, but he recognizes you by name, confirming your belonging and your safety. His defense is activated by his intimate knowledge of your specific distress. He does not just build the walls, he patrols them, watching specifically for the threats targeting you. The security of the fortress is tied entirely to the goodness of the one who built it. The stronghold is reliable. Because the Lord is good, his perfection guarantees the perfection of your safety. If he were capable of failure, compromise, or change, then the walls might crumble. But because his nature is unchangeable and perfectly benevolent, the safety he offers is absolute. Now, we move toward the pinnacle of this security, the deepest, most profound level of refuge. A security so complete, it transcends physical location and becomes an intrinsic state of being. We transition from simply finding a safe place to realizing that our true life is hidden within the safest possible location, the life of God. The Apostle Paul in Colossians 3:3 gives us the ultimate architectural secret of this divine fortress. "For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." This is security through identity transfer. We are not just tenants renting space within the fortress. We have been absorbed into the very structure of God's existence. Think of what it means to be hidden. It means to be invisible to the forces that seek to harm you. The enemy cannot target what it cannot see. To be hidden with Christ means that any evil or destructive force targeting you must first successfully assault Christ himself, penetrate his resurrected life, and overcome his established victory. This is a ludicrous impossibility. Our life is not merely guarded, it is concealed within the unassailable, eternal existence of the Son. This is the ultimate climax of the Refuge doctrine. Our safety is not circumstantial, it is theological. It is not temporary, it is eternal. When you rest tonight, understand this profound truth. Your true, deepest life is veiled behind the impenetrable glory of Jesus Christ. If the world looks for you, the vulnerable, fragile you, it will fail to find you, because the you that truly matters is now incorporated into the victorious, hidden life of the Savior. This brings us to the final, necessary architectural element, the anchor. If our life is hidden, we need to know that this hidden life is secure and permanent, holding fast against the tides of doubt and tribulation. Hebrews 6:17-19 provides this certainty. Thus God, determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that by two immutable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we might have strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil. Consider the powerful imagery of the anchor of the soul. An anchor is useless if it is merely dropped into the troubled waters near the boat. It must be cast down deep until it catches hold of something solid and unmoving, something beneath the surface chaos. Our hope, our security, the very certainty of our eternal life is anchored not in this visible temporary world. Our anchor is cast behind the veil, into the Holy of Holies, into the very presence of God. It is affixed to the unchangeable counsel and oath of God himself, two things in which it is utterly impossible for God to mislead or fail. This anchor is sure and steadfast. It means that no matter how violently the storms of life toss your boat, no matter how high the waves of fear rise, the boat will not drift, because the line leading from your soul is connected to the eternal throne. The stability of your inner life is guaranteed by the immutability of God's promise. You are moored to eternity. This truth transforms the concept of the fortress from a mere physical shelter into a spiritual reality. You are protected not just by walls of stone, but by the very oaths of God. Your life is not just defended, it is hidden. Your hope is not fragile, it is anchored in heaven. Let these deeply layered assurances settle over you now. Feel the difference between seeking safety in the shifting elements of this world, money, reputation, temporary comfort, and finding refuge in the immovable character of God. The former requires constant maintenance, vigilance, and exhausting effort. The latter requires simple surrender and trust. Tonight, there is nothing left to defend, nothing left to hold on to through sheer human will. You have run into the strong tower, you are sheltered from the storm, and your soul is anchored firmly behind the veil. The security is absolute, total and guaranteed by the one who created time and space. Allow the certainty of your safety, your hiddenness, and your secure anchoring to completely displace any lingering fear or anxiety. The fortress is secure. The battle is already won by the one in whom you reside. The work is done. The refuge is found. Rest now, knowing that your life is hidden with Christ in God. Drift into that deep sleep, confident in the steadfast anchor of your soul. Surrender every single thought of worry, every remaining stress, and every anxiety to the safety of the fortress. Simply lie here within the walls and accept the absolute security He provides. Sleep well, child of the fortress. You are safe. The hour is late, and the world has softened its edges. The relentless clamor of the day has receded, replaced now by the deep, resonant stillness that only comes when we deliberately surrender our defenses and seek the final shelter. We have traversed the Psalms, walked the parapets of the Proverbs, and witnessed the immensity of the promises. Now, in this concluding moment of reflection, we are moving beyond the conceptual image of a safe place and stepping into the very reality of God's absolute, unwavering, and eternal sanctuary. This is not merely a place of temporary retreat. This is the permanent existential dwelling of the soul. Pause now and let the breath deepen within your chest. Feel the weight of the day lift, not because the day's troubles have vanished, but because the location of your true self has changed. We are no longer standing exposed in the open field of anxiety. We are inside the walls, far removed from the shifting sands and predictable collapses of human effort. The question that echoes softly in the night is, how profound is this security? Is it a thin shield easily penetrated by the deeper spiritual battles? Or is it, as the Scriptures claim, an impenetrable absolute reality? Let us establish the context of this final piece. We are not just seeking relief from the obvious terrors, the financial worries, the health scares, the relational ruptures. We are seeking refuge from the foundational instability of the created order itself. Every earthly structure, every human plan, every temporal certainty carries within it the seed of its own decay. Time is the ultimate enemy of human security. Everything we build, time will eventually erode. Everything we cherish, time will eventually separate us from. This is the deeper conflict, the soul's innate struggle against mortality and ultimate loss. We strive endlessly for permanence in a world defined by transition. This is the open loop of human existence. How do we find lasting rest when the universe itself is in constant dynamic flux? The answer is found not in avoiding the storm, but in finding a shelter that exists outside the jurisdiction of the storm. We began our journey with the solid structure of Psalm 18. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Tonight, let us fully internalize the layered meaning of that fortress. Imagine for a moment the sheer density of that rock. It is not sedimentary rock, easily chipped or worn by the elements. It is the primordial, igneous foundation of reality itself. Its surface is vast, unmoving, and utterly unyielding. This rock defies the very notion of time or force. It has no seams, no vulnerabilities, no points of entry for attack. The strength we are describing here is not comparative strength, stronger than this, stronger than that, but absolute strength, which renders all external threats irrelevant. When the Scripture defines God as our fortress, it invites us to consider the impossibility of siege. A human fortress, no matter how well engineered, is always susceptible to being bypassed, undermined, or starved out. God's fortress, however, is not a structure containing safety. It is safety itself. The walls are not made of stone and mortar. The walls are made of His character, His truth, His faithfulness, and His immutable love. This means that to attack the dwelling is to attack the very nature of God, an attempt that is doomed to eternal failure. The security we experience is a direct participation in His invulnerability. We are not defended by Him. We are encompassed in Him. Think of the name of the Lord as described in Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. In ancient thought, the name was not just a label. It was the essence, the totality of the person's character and power. To run into the name of the Lord is to immerse oneself completely in His essence, His trustworthiness, His power, His infinite wisdom. And the glorious paradox here is the accessibility of this impenetrable refuge. A human fortress requires scaling sheer cliffs or breaching massive gates. God's strong tower requires only movement, running. It implies urgency, a desperate, honest admission of need, followed immediately by the certainty of arrival. The gate is always open for those who genuinely seek entry. The moment you declare, "My God, my rock, in whom I take refuge," you are already safely inside. The intention is the entrance. The belief is the barrier against the world. Let us shift the metaphor slightly, as Scripture often does, from the architectural strength of the fortress to the elemental comfort of the shelter. Isaiah 25:4 reminds us that God is a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat. Consider the difference between a simple shelter and an absolute shield. When the heat of intense difficulty, perhaps sharp criticism, the burning sting of past regret, or the scorching pressure of a crisis presses down, we instinctively seek shade. Most earthly shade is temporary. The sun shifts, the shadow moves, and we are once again exposed to the searing intensity. But the shadow provided by the Almighty is permanent and perfect. It is not just a place where the sun is momentarily blocked. It is a profound cooling of the spirit. It is the assurance that though the heat may rage outside, its intensity cannot penetrate the protective cloud of His presence. This refuge is proactive, meeting the threat before it reaches us, dissipating the burning rays of anxiety and fear before they can cause lasting damage. This shade is the tranquility that settles over the soul, knowing that God controls the temperature of the trial. The trial may be hot, but you, sheltered in Him, remain cool and composed. This experience of sheltered peace is further magnified in Psalm 91, the quintessential scripture of dwelling. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. The language here is so intimate. Dwells. It is not a visitor's pass. It is permanent residency. And where does the resident rest? In the shadow of the Almighty. This shadow is not a passive absence of light. It is the active, comforting presence of His vast power hovering over us. Imagine leaning back, completely relaxed, entirely covered by the encompassing wings of an eagle. Wings so immense and powerful that no predator or element could possibly pierce the barrier they form. This sense of being utterly covered, protected by feathers and shielded by truth, brings us to the crucial pivot point. How can we ensure that this inner sense of security remains, even when the external world seems to be proving the opposite. This is where the metaphor must leave the land and move into the eternal stability of the heavens. We turn to the promise found in the book of Hebrews, which speaks to the absolute certainty of God's oath. We are reminded that God, desiring more strongly to show to the heirs of the promise the unchangeableness of his purpose, interposed with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we may have strong encouragement, we who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. And here is the crucial re-engagement, the deep anchor. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, firm and secure, and one which enters within the veil. An anchor is designed not for calm waters, but for the violent turbulence of the deepest storms. It must grip the bottom with such tenacity that the ship above, though violently tossed by waves and gale-force winds, remains fundamentally in place. But our spiritual anchor is unique. It is not anchored to the sea floor of the unstable earth. It is anchored within the veil, in the Holy of Holies, in the very presence of God in heaven. It is tethered to the unchangeable, immutable character of the divine. Our security is not dependent on the strength of our grasp, but on the certainty of the ground to which the rope is fastened. The hope, the certainty, the future safety is fixed in a dimension utterly unaffected by our current circumstances. The storms of this life, the sickness, the loss, the fear of tomorrow, are confined to the surface of the sea, but our true safety is submerged, held fast to the eternal rock within the veil. This brings us to the climax, the great reveal, the absolute truth that transcends all other metaphors of refuge and fortress. The ultimate security is not merely in having God as a safe place, but in the truth that our existence has been spiritually relocated. Consider the profound reality articulated in Colossians 3:3. This single verse closes every loop, resolves every conflict, and establishes the deepest, most tranquil form of rest possible. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Let this phrase settle over you like a blanket of perfect stillness. Your life is hidden with Christ in God. This means the refuge is no longer an external location you run into. The refuge is your fundamental ontological status. To be hidden means you are invisible to those forces that seek your destruction. To be hidden with Christ means that any power seeking to harm you must first penetrate the risen, glorified, and seated Son of God. To be hidden in God means that you are enveloped by the omnipotence, the omniscience, and the eternity of the Creator. What does it mean for your life to be invisible to destruction? It means that the things that truly define you, your spirit, your destiny, your eternal standing, are no longer accessible to the thief, the destroyer, or even death itself. They are shielded by a layer of divine invisibility. The greatest fear we possess is the fear of loss. Loss of health, loss of stability, loss of self. But if your truest self, your actual life, is hidden in God, how can it be lost? The only way to steal it is to steal God Himself. The only way to damage it is to damage the divine nature. Since both are impossible, your security is absolute. We often struggle because we confuse the temporary, visible, and perishable shell, the body, the career, the reputation, with the eternal, invisible, and imperishable life hidden within. When the shell is cracked, we panic, forgetting that the real treasure is securely guarded. The revelation of Colossians 3:3 is that the greatest act of seeking refuge is the act of spiritual relinquishment. We died to our own efforts, our own perceived control, our own temporal safety plans, and were raised to a life that is completely outsourced to Christ. He is the guardian, the location, and the guarantee of our existence. In this hiddenness, there is profound, deep rest. You do not have to fight for your survival tonight or tomorrow. Your life is not subject to the chaotic decisions of men, the virulence of disease, or the capriciousness of chance. Your life is anchored within the veil, hidden in the fortress, secure in the name, sheltered beneath the shadow of the Almighty. This realization is the ultimate climax of our journey. We sought a safe shelter, and we found that we ourselves have been sealed within the unassailable reality of God. Our safety is not conditional upon the world's quietness, but upon God's unchangeableness. So, as we draw this reflection to a close, remember the journey we have taken. From acknowledging the storms, Psalm 46:1, to identifying the rock, Psalm 18:2, to experiencing the intimacy of the covering, Psalm 91:4, and finally to realizing the eternal reality of the hidden life, Colossians 1:3. You are not merely near the refuge tonight. You are the refuge, encompassed and sealed by the living God. Let this absolute certainty that your life is hidden, anchored, and secure be the final tranquil thought that lulls your heart into profound rest. The earth may shake, the economies may waver, and the personal challenges may persist, but the place where your soul truly resides remains unshakable, immovable, and eternally safe. Sleep in the confidence that you are protected not by the strength of your walls, but by the infinity of the one who holds you. This is the ultimate payoff of faith, not the promise of a life without trials, but the guarantee of absolute security within those trials. Rest now in the assurance that the Lord is not just our refuge. He is the perfect, all-encompassing, eternal fortress. May the stillness of His presence permeate every corner of your being tonight. Draw a deep, slow breath and release it fully. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and visualize yourself taking one final step across a threshold and into a place of absolute stillness. Whisper the words, "My life is hidden with Christ in God." Let those words be the lullaby that carries you into the deepest, most protected sleep. Surrender the worries you carried into this moment, knowing they cannot touch the reality of your eternal security. May your sleep be deep, peaceful, and fully reflective of the unwavering protection of the Most High. Rest now, for you are safe.